From ABC News Radio, KMET 1490 in Southern California. This is Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio with your host, Tyler Jorgensen.
Welcome out to Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio. I am your host, Tyler Jorgensen, and today we have Chad Burmeister. Chad is the CEO of ScaleX.ai, which I am really excited to learn about the concept of always-on prospecting and Web 3.0 marketing. I'm just really excited to talk about this. But he's also a podcast host. He's an author, and he's got a lot of really cool things going on. So you should check him out at chadburmeister.com. But for the meantime, we're going to dive right into this. Chad, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, Biz Ninja, how can I say no? I mean, what a cool idea. My best friend from when I was a kid was a second-degree black belt. So when I saw Biz Ninja, I was like, I have to be on this show.
Yeah, I am a 0-degree black belt, but life and entrepreneurship teach you I guess it would be like the business school of hard knocks, right?
That's right.
Yeah. But thanks for coming out. So my first question for you, Chad, is this: when was the first time in your life that you realized you were an entrepreneur?
On the bus, when I learned how to sell suckers on the back of the bus, we would buy a gross of them. I think a gross is 144 in a big bucket, and we'd pay maybe $10, and I sold them for 25 cents each. And then I learned a hack, and that was the last couple were always worth a little more because scarcity kicks in. So I think I knew I was an entrepreneur when I was pre-10 years old, and it's been all fun and games since then.
It's interesting. Almost every entrepreneur has that like elementary school story and then like a couple of high school stories of the hustles that they figured out and they did to get things going. And I think it's just a way entrepreneurs see the world, right? They just see solutions where other people see problems. And
that's right. Yeah, right. When a problem comes our way, it's like, awesome. That means there must be a solution. So when all the stuff happening over the last couple of years have come out, entrepreneurs look at it like, wow, we got big problems to solve. Bring it.
Huge opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Huge opportunity. Right. So we're seeing a massive shift in technology and the way the internet works and the way the world works again, right? And for those of us that remember plugging in the internet, this is again, not for the first time. So you founded ScaleX.ai, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's been 4 years. We just had our 4-year anniversary very recently. And it was exciting because the very first month, you're always nervous. And I'd been a CEO, an entrepreneur before, and I did that run for about a couple of years. And I hadn't figured out the cash flow game yet, which I don't know if I have yet either, which entrepreneur does. And then I also didn't understand leadership and management and leadership. So, now that I'm running my own company, it's at 4 years, it's been a lot of fun. I went into a company 6-7 years ago with the goal of figuring out what the problem was that needed to be solved in the world. So some could say, why did you take a step back and run a business development team when you're running quota carrying salespeople for so long?
Right.
And it's because I wanted to find a business problem that needed solving. And what I found is when I scaled this team from 10 people up to 20 to 50 to eventually 100, is that throwing human labor at a business problem like prospecting, man, it's just such a costly experience. And I think that where the world's moving is that AI and technology and automation, it can actually make a person more human than they already are. And I think a lot of people think like, oh, it's just going to take away jobs and it's going to do all this other stuff. Maybe, but do you really want to be going out and manually pulling down the name of somebody and looking up where they went to college when you could rely on a technology to not only pull that information at scale, tell me what groups they're a part of on LinkedIn, pre-configure the message that hits that person, because maybe one person reads in bullets and one reads in paragraphs. Like if I can power you with the Iron Man suit, now one single person can be the equivalent of 5 or 10 people. That's what I've seen happen. That's what I have people on the podcast that I talk about. And it's just been really, really fun to see.
I think there is a fine line between AI and technology replacing jobs and AI and technology allowing humans to do more human work and more like high level, more where the interpersonal skills, where the soft art of being a human comes in. Now,
Yes.
technology is I mean, massively gaining in a lot of those aspects, but in the end, I think I'm really talking to you here. So hopefully,
yeah, that's right. I didn't bring in the Chad virtual Chad today
right.
yet.
And there is a value in that human face-to-face interaction. And you're right. Like I love staying connected with people, but I don't love doing analytical research and diving in, right? So if there's technology that can support that. So you've created ScaleX.ai. What is the message that you guys are taking to the market? What is it that you're doing?
Well, it's interesting because we're coming up on a new start of a new year, and it's always time to kind of look in the mirror and say, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up? And we're even at this point where we may rebrand the business from ScaleX to XHuman, and it's XHUMN. And the originally we were thinking delightfully human because it makes you more human. I'm always of the opinion of scale, and so it's probably going to land on exponentially human. So XHuman is not you used to be a human. No, it's you're exponentially human. And that's where I think things are going to go, right? Can I be one? Am I a 1-to-1? Am I a 1-to-2, 1-to-5? I had lunch with Howard Dover from UT Dallas recently for 2.5 hours, breakfast actually. And he had just driven his daughter cross country. And he said that when his students graduate, they're one of the top sales schools in the country. When they graduate and they go to a job, they're on average 5 times more productive, meetings, pipeline, and sales. And so all the people around them are like, what are you doing? What's different? Well, they've embraced the new technology, right? It's kind of like if you went into a farm and you were going to farm that field and you go, okay, hey, there's your little rototiller. Have fun, whatever that is. And then the other guy comes in and goes, what are you doing with that little thing? We've got this machinery now. Where have you been? What year are you living in? And that's what I feel we're going through the transformation of. I remember being at a Salesforce Dreamforce conference and Bill Clinton spoke one time. And he said that when he was president, productivity gains bumped by like 2 to 3, maybe even 5%. And so our nation had a big GDP growth. And, I don't consider myself political one way or the other. I just love to hear people talk. And so thinking about AI, the internet brought a lot of productivity. What if AI really brings a 2x, a 5x, a 10x? Wow. What will it look like 5 years from now? It's pretty exciting times.
Is there a point where the focus on productivity is the wrong focus?
For sure. Thinking about account-based selling, you have a finite universe. So if you've only got 100 potential prospects and you say, okay, I'm going to call everybody 12 times each, and I'm going to email them all, and we have a customer who ran 32 sequences over 4 years into this one company and never got a meeting. And then they came to us and we have this product that nobody else on the market has. It uses AI to identify who in your network knows your prospects. And then we ask the influencer for the introduction rather than going to the end prospect. So imagine if I went to you and said, hey, I see you know the CEO of company ABC. According to a Salesforce study, I'm 181 times more likely to sign that customer if you make the introduction for me. Because I come in with a 10 out of 10 trust. It's mine to blow. If I do a cold call, I've got to come in and I've got to build that trust. I'd rather come in from a position of trust rather than trying to build it in the sales call. So there's different technologies for different markets that are required.
Makes a ton of sense. I think it reminds me of like back in the old days where you'd ask your friend to introduce you to the hot girl, right? So then you got that initial like intro.
The wingman. Yeah, that's right.
So your tech is like the ultra, like it makes wingmen out of all of you.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that because I was always a pretty good wingman too. So
yeah,
we'll be your wingman.
It was just intuitive. You just built it on accident.
Yeah, that's right.
So being an entrepreneur is full of ups and downs. Throughout your journey, what was a major failure or challenge that you faced and how did you overcome it?
There's one thing that I've done twice now. And so I guess third time's a charm, but I'm never going to get to number 3, but I almost did recently. So, and that is when you go into business, you should not do a 50-50 partnership. It's as an entrepreneur, it just doesn't work most of the time. And I've heard so many failed stories, because if you do 50-50, there's always, think about it, a relationship. Yeah, it's so difficult, because if you get into a stalemate, then what? So the only way you can do a 50-50 is if you have very clearly defined stalemate steps, right? Here's what we're going to do. And so I was, it's been a while since I was an entrepreneur, and I said, hey, yeah, bro, let's do this. And I just said, yeah, 50-50 is fine. Well, as you get 3 months in and then 6 months in, you're like, wait a second, I've spent 30 years building a career in this. My other business partner has spent the last 5. And I'm like, man, he's one of the best cold callers on planet Earth. And so to hire that person might cost $100,000 a year. And I'm not a $100,000 a year person anymore. I'm just not. So the balance of power in the equation and okay, we're equals, and I'm going to go direct employees and contractors just like you because I'm the equal partner. It just set up the entire situation to fail. Luckily, I figured that out 3 to 6 months in. It ended up costing the business about $100,000 to unwind and unravel all of that, which was unfortunate. But those are the lessons that if you're thinking of doing a 50-50, just add a 1 and subtract 1 from some person in the parties, and then you'll be better off.
It's interesting. I like you, probably over the last 11 years doing this show, partnerships comes up when I ask that question a good percentage of the time.
Sure.
And the 50-50 thing comes up a lot. But another piece of advice that I got that really goes along with that I love, and is never give equity or partnership to a role that you could have just hired. Right. So usually I've seen plenty of 50-50 partnerships work, but it's because the two people complement each other in a way where there's a clear gap that will extend over time. Like, okay, I don't want to be an operator. You're going to be the operator and whatever it is. Right.
Yes.
That's 1. And then 2 is there are stalemate steps. Hey, who's the operating person as the day-to-day president versus the CEO or whatever each of those things are. Right. But then also like the ability at the very beginning to have those detailed conversations of how we're going to handle the hard conversation. Basically the business prenup, right?
Yeah.
Do you actually have an operating agreement that addresses the hard parts of the conversation? And what I always tell people is, if you can't sit down at the beginning, at the honeymoon stage of a partnership, and before you start the business and say, how are we going to handle business if you get divorced? How are we going to handle business if you die? How are we going to handle business and go through this list of worst case scenarios?
There's an offer, or
we need to bring in more equity. Whose equity is going to get diminished? If you can't do that when things are great at the beginning, the fun part of the business, that's a red flag, right?
Yeah. And the last piece, real quick, would be you can do, okay, hey, there's 10 million shares that are authorized. You get $1 million, I get $1 million. That's just because we're going into business together. And then the next 2 million shares we're going to do under an options plan. So if in 6 months you start realizing, wow, this is going south, I'm the CEO. Hey man, you get to keep your $1 million. Good news. And also good news, you get to go work for another company and you'll still keep your $1 million shares. You know?
And I love those types of bracketed stepping stone situations, because it is fascinating to me how many people will be sitting around having drinks together, come up with a business idea, and then decide right then to go into business 50-50, when I'm like, you got a lot to think about if you actually want that business to go anywhere. Yeah. Otherwise, and I've had painful exits out of partnerships where my big thing, I'm like, man, I know my future is worth more than this pain in the past, and I'm just going to move forward. So I think there's a lot, but what I don't like is when people take those problems and say, well, therefore I don't ever want to be in a partnership. It's like friends of mine that have been divorced that say, I never want to get married again. Yeah. I'm like, marriage wasn't the issue, man. You know what I mean? Partnerships aren't the issue. It's how you went into it, and doing it right. But really good lesson. I think this is a part of the episode I hope people really listen to, because these are the hard things that people don't think about when they go into business. They think about, if I just build this cool product, or if I just find this great marketing, or if I just hire the right salesperson. But if you messed up from the beginning on how you set it up, you're going to have to challenge.
Yeah. I mean, my friend Jason Adams is in Texas, and he's with a company called the Athlete Group. So these NFL players come to him, and he's the deal whisperer. They go, hey man, I'm looking, my brother said he wants $1 million, and here's what it's going to happen. And so Jason looks at the deal sheet and goes, okay, what are your goals, Mr. Athlete? And they go, well, I want to make like 10% a year. And then I think I can make 10 million at the exit, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, okay, I'm with those goals. So his thing is there's 4 pillars, right? There's the team, there's the investment vehicle, the exit strategy, and then there's the structure. And his deal, his understanding of the world is all around structure. So he can look at a deal like this and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he'll ask the questions that I would never even think to ask that are 2 years, 5 years down the line.
Right.
So it's important to have team members who look over your shoulder like that you can rely upon to go, all right, Jason, what about this? Recently, he's told me 3 times, we're talking to a company to potentially resell them and then resell us and ultimately someday maybe merge. And he's like, okay, the technology value is one piece, but what about the person, the other executive? And so he's looking at it like that's even more important perhaps than the technology. And it's like, I hadn't even thought of it that way. And he had to tell me twice for me to figure that out.
Yeah. And so what I hear from that is if you're going to be an entrepreneur, the importance of having good counsel around you, right? People that are going to nudge you. Because we all have, every business person, every entrepreneur has parts of the concept of the business model that they're stronger with, parts of the business makeup, right? Support our weaknesses. And I'm really big on just owning our weaknesses. I'm really big on not being the guy who's like, I'm going to go fix every one of my weaknesses. I just going to own it and find people around me that have strengths that in those gaps, right? And I'm going to focus on making my strengths better.
Great guy, CEO of Dugout Mugs. They're going to do $30 million in revenue this year. So his view on this area is very amazing. He says, look, if I can go hire someone that does 80% of what I would do, then that's great. He goes, now, the good news is I usually hire someone that's 120% of what I can do right? But even if it's 80, that's how I scale. And he goes, and then I'll hire 2. So I'll get 80 and 80. I'll get 160%. And it's like, there's no way that I could humanly do that. So thinking of it, and he's like, but I'm also a good hirer. So I end up getting 120 and 120.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's pretty powerful. And it's hard. It does take giving up control. And I love that he says 80 because so many people think if you can't hire the 120, you shouldn't do it. But I think, man, like if I can get somebody else doing 80%, but buy back all of that time and all that resources to focus on the things that only I can do or that I can do at a higher level.
That's right.
Powerful. I'll follow up later. But what's the founder or CEO's name?
His name's Chris Dennert, Dehnert. Super guy, just willing to share his time. And I'm sure he'd love to be on your podcast.
Awesome. That sounds good. I love stories like that. I think my guests do too, is just people who are not only building great things, but finding unique ways to solve those problems. So looking at what your company is doing with ScaleX and whatever it's going to be called here going into the new year, who is it helping? And how it give us a little bit more of who the ideal customer is for that.
It's evolved, as I'm sure a lot of businesses do. We started working with funded startups in technology, Series A, B, C, D. They've got money that's burning a hole in their pocket, and we might as well capture a percentage of it and help them scale faster than they could than hiring a team. Where I think my passion has moved the company is solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. Especially I'm drawn to people who've hit a challenge in life, maybe a traumatic experience. They've found a relationship with God, like bringing in my faith to the equation. That's where the 2 lines are starting to come together over time. I think traditionally a lot of people it was really separation of your business and your faith. Nowadays with the advent, I'll call it, of COVID, it's changed because now you're coming into my house, right? And it's like, okay, if we're here, let's talk about it. So I really look for people who've experienced something traumatic, found a relationship in the process, and they want to share it with the world. So I can pivot 1 degree from what I'm used to doing and providing these services to high-end funded startups and move it to help people at a $500 a month rate instead of a $5,000 a month rate. And just like, it's kind of like Jerry Maguire movie, right? Where it's like, wait, you're doing what? And, people on the board, wait, you're going to do what? And you've got like 15 to 20 where you're just donating services to. What's that all about? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just listening to the little voice in my head. And he keeps telling me that I need to help people who are in need. And one day by doing that, I'm quite certain that something good's going to happen. So it's really these solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. I'll tell you one of the most recent stories. His name's Jarvis Guthrie. He made one wrong decision in life, and he's probably made more than that, but one that's bad, one that was big. He was drinking too much. It was in 2012. He's at his brother-in-law's house. He just had a baby. He walks out into the street. He's stumbling around a little bit, and he's like, "Oh, I got to go back to bed." And so he goes in and he kicks in the wrong door because the door was locked. It was a police officer's house. So the police officer aims the gun at him. The gun jams, and he pistol whips him down. And so he gets arrested, goes to jail for more than a year, 2-3 years. A minister finds him named Rodney and spends time with him, and he understands, okay, this is why I went. It's to help other people, because he meets people who, he met people who were all kinds of different stories, right? That was his one bad decision. There's people who make a lot of bad decisions. So now his mom died in 2014. His dad died in 2019. He inherited his dad's farm of 32 acres. His dream now is the whole farm, 60 acres, because the aunts and uncles own some others. So it's in a part of Florida. He's building a farm. He's renovating all the land. He's got an acre zoned for residential. And so if you get out of prison, you've got a mark on your head. You're stamped. You can't come to work here because liability and everything else. It's like heaven. I drove there. It's 1.5 miles off the road. And you get to this farm and you're like, am I in heaven? And so that's the kind of person that I just love.
That story is amazing. How does ScaleX, how does that help him?
Yeah, well, we just learned how to do websites. So we build it. We started doing it on Squarespace. We learned that doesn't have all the bells and whistles. So now we're doing WordPress. And we're kind of cookie cuttering it, right? A video, then you go talk to this person that you're going to get you on a radio. Then we're going to help you have a kid's book. Then we're going to help you build a parent book. Like, we'll help you with the series of steps to become an entrepreneur and tell your story. And then there's a TV show we can get you on. There's so many. Then we do LinkedIn outreach. And so think about it. If you hit a bell and it has a big, loud gong noise, well, that might hit for certain people. Jarvis, big, long gong bell. Another person might be like Tinkerbell, ding. So what I feel like is all these different entrepreneurs have different stories. One's that's in prison, one's that's, I'm helping a group in Africa. I'm helping a group in India with 200 churches. It's fun to be able to know that we're rippling through eternity by helping these people. Website, LinkedIn outreach, voicemail drops, email blasts, like everything that I've done for the last 30 years is now being pointed at making the world a better place.
And in the end, though, like those are all of the products. The end concept is that you're going to get them in front of the right people, right? Yeah. So and that's going to help their business move forward. So
build the base so they could become an entrepreneur. Doing
which is interesting. It's very different than what I thought from what you had. I thought it was more okay. Hey, you're a salesperson. You're trying to sell this. You're an entrepreneur. And you're trying to sell this one service. We'll help you have a pipeline full of ideal customers.
Yeah, that's still what we do. That's where the two lines are starting to come together. Living a Better Story.media, livingabetterstory.org. Those are all kind of still on the dark web, not released yet. But I've been doing those passion projects now for the last 1.5 years.
You've been doing some cool things. You've got all this happening. I'm a big believer that entrepreneurship is building the lifestyle you want, or like you say, building a better story, living a better story. What is one item on your personal, not business, but your personal bucket list you're going to accomplish in the next 12 months?
It's funny, when I wrote down my 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year plans back when I was early 20s, the only one I didn't achieve in 2 years was getting a boat. And I never got it, and I'm never going to. So that one's just going to have a big blank checkbox by it forever. The one that's really on the top of my mind is getting a house in the mountains, and because I love to ski. So my folks have a place in Winter Park right on the slope side. And you know what? That's good enough placebo effect for me, because it's $75 for a cleaning fee and I can stay for a week, and you can't really beat that. But ultimately, within 12 months, I believe I will have a place in the mountains that I can call my own as well.
It's interesting. I had a boat for a little while, and what I learned is it is better to have a friend that has a boat than to have a boat.
That's right. I have a best friend who has a boat, and it's
similar to a place in the mountains. It's better to have a family member that has, I remember one of the first times when I read 4 Hour Workweek, he said like the old rich, it's, the last name of the town name, right? But now it's about not being tied to a specific place. So we have a place in the mountains, but at the same time, like I'm not looking to get anything else. I'm like, you can just go rent a place and then try a new place every time and have the freedom to be new, to go new places and stuff is a lot more flexible. I like that. I crossed out boat for you. Just
perfect. That's just gone. And I think it's still in my file that's moved 7 houses by now. It's still sitting there and it'll be there laminated for life.
One of the greatest things about goals is that you set them, but it's okay to change them too. That's right? It's okay to change what we think and what we want as we grow up. But well, I love it. I hope that people go follow you and learn more at chadburmeister.com. Check out ScaleX.ai to see your software and what you're doing. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners?
I've interviewed almost 100 people on the Living a Better Story podcast, and I ask the same kinds of things. What was your passion when you were young? What's the buzzsaw of life that hit you in the middle? And then what role does faith play in your journey? And where did God undeniably show up? And what's almost true 100% of the time is that the traumatic event that you experienced is when God showed up for people. So if you're in a hard moment and you're listening to this right now, just look around and listen to people and pray about it, because he'll just show up. And that's the times that, even though it feels tough, that's the time when he does his best work. So don't think that you got in that situation because of your creator, but just look around for him and he'll help you get out of the ditch. And all you got to do is ask. And then he shows up tenfold. But that's the biggest thing that I learned, man. I've heard people who were abused, people who were homeless when they were kids. And this one woman I talked to yesterday, she actually walked down the aisle at her church, and the church wasn't very nice. And she said she became elevated. She actually went like a foot into the air. And it's like, wait a second. And so it's just fun talking to these people, experience miracles and see things that happen. I think we forget about that as entrepreneurs a lot of times.
It is interesting how many times we want the result of the refiner's fire without going through the refiner's fire. Totally. And it's the tough times, the challenges, that's where we have an opportunity to grow and get better. Appreciate you coming out on the show, Chad. And to all my listeners, watchers, viewers, wherever you're tuning in, watching, or listening, it's your turn to go out and do something.
Thank you for listening to Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio with Tyler Jorgensen. Please make sure to subscribe so you're first to hear new interviews and episodes. If you found this podcast to be valuable, please share it with a friend. Don't forget to visit our online dojo at bizninja.com to claim your reward for listening to the show.